All right, everybody. Today is November 22nd, 2022. Of course, the general election took place November 8th. I'm going to tell you the latest today from a number of sources. I'm definitely in the loop. I seem to be a hub of information, but I'm going to tell you my ideas too about this election and what the founders would have done. So if you think you've heard it all about election integrity, think again. All right, everybody, what a mess we have in Arizona. And my gosh, what a lot of activity that's going on, a lot of fighting going on, fighting for what's right. And it's interesting because somebody pointed out that Katie Hobbs talked about Kari Lake's campaign as being chaos, and yet people are talking about this election being filled with chaos. Of course, the big news is that Mark Brnovich, the Attorney General's office, sent out a letter which was signed by Jennifer Wright, the Assistant Attorney General. And if you haven't seen that, let me read key parts of it. The Elections Integrity Unit of the Arizona Attorney General's office has received hundreds of complaints since Election Day. And this letter was dated November 19th. So even more complaints have been coming in related to the administration of the 2022 general election in Maricopa County. These complaints go beyond pure speculation, but include firsthand witness accounts that raise concerns regarding Maricopa's lawful compliance with the Arizona election law. Furthermore, statements made by both Chairman Gates and Recorder Riker, along with information Maricopa County released through official modes of communication, appear to confirm potential statutory violations of Title 16. So, and then at the end, it says Arizonans deserve a full report and accounting of the myriad problems that occurred in relation to Maricopa County's administration of the 2022 general election. As the canvas is looming and these issues relate to Maricopa County's ability to lawfully certify election results, the unit requests a response to the aforementioned issues on or before Maricopa County submits its official canvas to the Secretary of State, which, by the way, is Katie Hobbs. Talk about a conflict of interest. That's my comment, which must occur on or before November 28th. So this letter is huge. And people are asking, well, are Brnovich and Wright going to follow through on it? Personally, I think this letter is so strongly worded that now they have an obligation. But I think there are some other tools that we can use to insist on election integrity. Now, here's another story that it seems the Daily Caller broke on November 21st. And I've been working with various reporters to verify this. And I actually spoke with someone, a source who is working with this group of lawyers and others who verified that this is the case. So the article is titled, Maricopa County's election dysfunction was more widespread than officials said, memo claims. Again, this is from Daily Caller yesterday. Bullet points, more Maricopa County voting centers saw tabulator or printer issues than officials had announced, according to a memo by an attorney who observed the election process. Quote, it seems very clear that the printer tabulator failures on election day at 62.61% of the vote centers observed by 11 roving attorneys, and the resulting long lines at a majority of all vote centers led to substantial voter suppression, the memo said. It is certainly safe to assume that many voters refused to wait in such lines, left the vote center, and did not return to vote later, the memo read. A survey of the electorate could easily confirm such an assumption. So this group of lawyers is saying that they were on site, they were documenting these things, and a survey of the electorate could show that disenfranchisement. And of course, Kari Lake is posting a number of videos. I think this is all great. This is all getting people a voice. Let me see here. So on November 8th, the day of the midterm elections, 11 of the roving attorneys tasked with observing election processes in the Republican National Committee, RNC's election integrity program in Arizona collectively visited nearly 52% of the county's voting centers, okay? And they alleged that 72 of the 115 centers saw, quote, material problems with the tabulators not being able to tabulate ballots. Let's see. The findings of the memo would indicate that tabulation and printer problems at Maricopa County voting centers were more widespread than election officials had previously claimed. Now, this is interesting because, and if you go to this article, there's an official memo there sent to people like Kelly Ward, the Republican chairperson for the state. And let's see. They say, for instance, Maricopa County's main Twitter account said November 9th that an issue with printers had affected an estimated 17,000 ballots across 70, about 31% of the county's 223 voting centers, with tabulators unable to read some ballots, so on and so forth. So what's interesting about this is, differently than in the 2020 election, people were prepared. They sent out observers. They documented things. Now, I don't know anything about this. I just saw a post from Mike Lindell that he has video evidence of votes being switched. I think that's something worth looking into. And again, back to this letter from Branovich's office, they said that ballots were, let me see if I can find it real quick here. Gosh, so many problems. Check out procedures not followed. Okay, Maricopa County appears to have failed to adhere to the statutory guidelines in segregating, counting, tabulating, tallying, and transporting the door 3 ballots. In fact, Maricopa County has admitted in some voting locations, door 3 non-tabulated ballots were commingled with tabulated ballots at the voting location. Okay, to me, this is automatically cause for redo. You put non-tabulated ballots with tabulated ballots. How do you find out which are which? That's throwing votes away. Further, we have received a sworn complaint from an election observer indicating that more than 1,700 door 3 non-tabulated ballots from just one voting location were placed in black duffel bags that were intended to be used for tabulated ballots. There is all kinds of mishandling, I'd say violations of the law, of procedure. This election cannot be certified. And speaking of that, I just started listening to this. Joshua Phillip is a friend and colleague of mine. Go to theepictimes.tv. Let me see. Let me check that. Times. Yeah, the Epic Times. Let me see. Got to make sure I have that right. I'm running in 1,000 different directions at once. Okay, theepictimes.com/epictv, and look for Joshua Phillips' Crossroads Show. And the title of his show is Arizona Uncertifiable? Uncertifiable. So Arizona AG demands evidence prior to recertification. And I can tell you, Joshua Phillips is thorough. His show is excellent. So I encourage you to watch that. And let's see here. All right, what else? All right, so because of the letter that the Attorney General's office sent out, because of the videos, the sworn affidavits, all of this that's coming out, 4 Arizona counties have delayed election certification. Those counties, look, we have 15 counties in Arizona. Those 4 counties are Gila, Cochise, Mojave, and Yavapai. And I'm going to go ahead right here as a citizen and say, and encourage the other counties to hold back on certifying, to delay it, if not completely refuse. And Pima County is never going to do it. Pima County is so corrupt. But Pinal County, where Sheriff Mark Lamb is the sheriff, I believe Pinal County can do it. I know it's been talked about. So I want to encourage publicly for Pinal County to join this, and any and every other county, because look, this isn't a partisan issue. This isn't about certain candidates. This is about the integrity of our elections, which have had problems for a long time. Some of you might remember that Katie Hobbs also messed up in the primaries when thousands of ballots in Pinal County were sent to the wrong addresses. How do you go back and let those people know? Talk about chaos. It's written all over Katie Hobbs and her fellow candidates. So let me go on here. Let's see. All right. So I'm going to go to Twitter and update you on a few things. First, I want to go to Carrie Lake's Twitter. I want to stay away from Katie Hobbs' Twitter. Look, in regards to Katie Hobbs' Twitter and some of these other candidates, they're claiming governor-elect. They're taking their victory laps. No way, no way. It's not valid under these conditions. So look at that as propaganda. They're ignoring and Bill Gates at Maricopa County. Shame on you for doing your little PR dance. That's not your job to do PR and carry water for one party. It's your job to say, we're going to be transparent. We're going to look into these issues. We take them seriously, because when hundreds, and I would say thousands of voters are coming forward saying our vote was suppressed, we were disenfranchised, we were told we couldn't vote, then that's the buck stops at your desk. That's on you. So stop glad handing it. Stop putting out propaganda. I hope and think that you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So you better save your documents. All right. Carrie Lake posted 18 hours ago, election day was even worse than we thought. So she quotes an article from the Arizona Sun-Times, or posts an article from the Arizona Sun-Times.com. Maricopa County voting centers plagued with tabulation errors. Some of the information I just covered is in that article. Carrie Lake retweeted from I Vote Arizona. Tens of thousands of you have reached out pleading with me to fight this fight. Rest assured I will. And there are many other of us who are fighting, not necessarily just for the candidates, but for the issues that they stand for, which include the right to fair, honest, and well-organized elections. Let's see. Oh, Students for Carrie Lake says we have been permanently banned on TikTok after 4 affidavit videos were taken down. The CCP knows that there's something wrong with our elections and they don't want the American people questioning them. Well, not only does the CCP know that, they're behind a lot of this. And I encourage you to go to the epictimes.com or go to Epic TV and watch the new documentary that we just put out, which is The Final War. I have to say, The Final War, I watched it. I'm helping write up some marketing descriptions for it. I'm going to have more information about that. But I would say this is the most important documentary of our lifetimes, and that's not hyperbole. It exposes what China's been doing in our country. It peels back the layers of statements they've said according to their plans. Again, it's narrated by my friend Joshua Phillip, and it's absolutely brilliant and absolutely necessary that you watch this and share this with everyone, because look, our country is on the verge of being defeated by China. And this just in: Brazil's Bolsonaro challenges election results. Let me see, Valiant. Sometimes I look at Valiant News, which is part of the Spreely network that I'm on. Bolsonaro challenges election results, cites nonconformities in voting machines. So Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro seeks to invalidate 250,000 votes he and his supporters claim are invalid. Look, this is a pattern all over the world. This didn't just happen in Arizona. It's happened in other states. It's happened in other countries. And I'll tell you something. Look, I don't want you to start making me a tinfoil hat. If you watch The Final War, you'll understand this is reality. China is behind these things. China wants to supplant the U.S. as the next major superpower. And something that really disturbs me is what French President Macron said, that China is in the driver's seat, but that we need one world government. Look, this is no longer like backdoors chat room kind of stuff. This is happening. This is right out in the public. So if you don't know about these things, you need to educate yourself. If you don't know about these, go on your social media, contact me. I'll send you some links. And I was right where you were. Look, people used to tell me about the globalists, and I would just shut my ears because I'm like, oh, whatever. That's conspiracy. It's really not conspiracy. Now I want to shift to something, because I studied really deeply into this issue. Obviously, like many of you, the Arizona election troubled me. What I saw troubled me. And I was actually at the election party in Scottsdale. I was there. I saw Carrie. I saw others. I've communicated with basically all the candidates. Several of them I know personally. Several of them I'm still talking to now. So I'm in the know. I know what's going on. And I was very, very troubled by what I saw. I was also troubled leading up to the election that Katie Hobbs refused to debate, that she didn't do much campaigning. And I'll be right back after a message about our delicious coffee. Hey guys, I want to take a quick break to tell you about Freedom Talk Coffee. This is some amazingly good coffee, and I'm a little biased because Andrea roasts each batch lovingly for you, and you're going to know that our coffee doesn't go to fund woke agendas. You're actually helping support the work that we do with Freedom Talk to restore American values on the foundation of natural rights, to fight for your freedom, to restore our country. So we really appreciate if you subscribe monthly, annually, or even make a one-time purchase. What did you put in this coffee? Coffee plus. All right. So sorry, I got a call, and I had to do a commercial break really quickly there. So I want to leave you with something that I wrote. So I was very troubled by what I saw. And from my perspective, I believe the evidence is overwhelming that incompetence, but I think it goes beyond incompetence. Look, I think it goes beyond the sloppy, the sloppy management of a campaign. I believe there was massive amounts of cheating and fraud. And again, I do believe that that's carrying water for the Chinese Communist Party, because watch The Final War on Epic TV. It's free. You're going to find out. They pull back the layer of what's going on. It's incontrovertible. I mean, going back to former presidents, going way, way back. But I was troubled. So I did a study. I looked at how the founders of our country stood up to tyranny, corruption, graft, the elites, what the tricks that they pull. And I looked at, did they tell us anything? Did they give us any hints of what we should do today? So I wrote a blog, and you can find it at realfreedomtalk.com let's see. Just actually, here, this is easier. Just go to linktapgo.com, and you'll find a link on there, a little box that says Kelly's latest article. Go to that, and you can read this new article that I put out. And I have to tell you, I spent a lot of time on this. I really looked at what the founders put down, because look, we have the Constitution, we have the Bill of Rights, we have the Declaration of Independence. A lot we can glean from the Declaration of Independence, but outside of that, the founders looked ahead and saw things like this happening. So what did they say? So I'm going to read you just a couple or three excerpts from this blog, but I really encourage you to read it. Again, go to linktapgo.com/Kelly. So to remedy the 2022 Arizona election fiasco, we need to look to the founders of the American Republic. They set the example and told us what to do. Now, keep in mind, this is an op-ed. I'm not trying to tell anyone what they should do or get them to act in a certain way. It's simply a paper or an op-ed saying this is what they said and this is what I think they would have done. So the 2022 midterm elections in Arizona have been a debacle, outdoing even previously poorly run, compromised elections in a state fraught with integrity issues. With at least half of Arizona's voters disenfranchised, cheated, and suppressed, many are demanding a remedy. Those wishing to contest the results have brought evidence of incompetence and even foul play to legal teams, to the state attorney general's office, and before the public. The battle for fair and transparent elections has become punitive toward those calling for answers, witnessed by the swift and brutal response to the January 6 protesters who had similar allegations about the 2020 presidential election. This intimidates a large number of voters into inaction. I'm going to skip parts of this, but I want you to get the gist of most of it. So essentially, I'll give you the upshot of the article. The founders of the American Revolution really hinged the protest on some words by, let's see, I believe it was, yes, James Otis' rallying cry of taxation without representation is tyranny. So they tied taxation to their rights to have representation. And what I'm asserting is that without fair elections, we could say no taxation without the representation that comes from fair, clean, accountable elections. I think that would be fair to say. I think it's something that is intrinsic to our country. And I'm going to tell you, it goes back even before the American Revolution. So let me read a little more. Bear with me here. I'm trying not to be too monotone as I read. I'm working on it. I'm trying not to read monotone. So let's see. Will rallies bring reform? So I see people getting together. Let's hit the streets. Let's do a peaceful protest. Will protests force dishonest and unjust powers to deal fairly with the people? The world watches as the people of Brazil flood the streets in massive numbers to demand election integrity, asserting that their election was stolen. As the masses in Brazil plead with their military to intervene, the outcome is uncertain. We don't know what could happen. The military could turn on them. As reported by PBS, I looked up an article the other day, PBS NewsHour, quote, although the Bolsonaro administration has not opposed the transition of power, and I think that has changed, the far-right leader has yet to concede or congratulate his opponent. Many of his supporters are taking the cue and refusing to accept the result. At one point, they threatened to paralyze the county with more than 1,000 blocked highways and roads. So they wanted to be obstructionists. They wanted to block roads. What was the outcome of that? On November 11th, the Supreme Court ordered law enforcement to liberate all roads and public spaces. So that didn't work very well. Many in Arizona feel the same desperation expressed by Dominguez Carvalho, 63, a resident of Brazil. He said, I'm fighting for my country, for my daughter and 3 grandchildren, he said, adding that he sometimes kneels down in front of the military's building to pray. I'll stand here as long as necessary. We are peaceful, but we will never, ever leave our country in the hands of communists. So I have to applaud that. And I think that's something, nonviolent protest has a long history in our country, and I think it has a place. However, I see people doing the same kind of thing that they did in 2020, and I'm not convinced it'll work. 1 second. Okay. Over the past, but we do not live in Brazil. We live in the United States of America. In our outrage over schemes to steal our voices and hijack our elections, the remedies our founders granted to us when we find our liberties usurped and abused have been largely overlooked. Perhaps they've been forgotten. Over the past 2 years of unconscionable violations of our constitutional rights, we've turned to mass protests, litigation, and appeals to government authorities. All the tactics our pre-revolutionary ancestors tried to free themselves from the control of Great Britain, but to no avail. So before 1776, the American colonists tried to appeal to King George, tried to appeal to the governors. Look, they had a system not entirely unlike our own. We had British law. They were appealing to rightful claims to the law. So what they did was they drew on what we call an Anglosphere. Let me find my place again. Anglosphere heritage of freedom that went back centuries. Now, but Anglosphere just means English-speaking world. Okay, so India is part of the Anglosphere. Many countries are part of the Anglosphere, and even countries that don't speak English, because that heritage of freedom was brought to the world by America in a way it had never been done. So basically, anybody around the world who believes in freedom is part of that tradition that started in the Anglosphere. It's a tradition of strength through unity balanced with individual sovereignty that America shared with the entire world. Yet we have forgotten who we are. We're succumbing to the hopelessness of tyranny as dishonest and power-hungry politicians and their administrators drain the life and spirit from those whom their authority is derived. Now, listen. I don't want you to fall into hopelessness. I've gotten a lot of messages of what can we do? We're screwed. It's going to be the same as the 2020 election. Okay. I truly believe, and I think it's almost a fact that social distancing, the virtual house arrest of the lockdowns, and the bullying from our own government put us in a place to break our morale and break our will, to separate us so that we couldn't get together as we do as Americans. Because when we get together, man, things happen. When we get together, we have a unified voice. It's game over for tyrants. And I know some were well-intentioned. Some, back the lockdowns for a time, the masking, all of that. I think a lot of them came to their senses. So I say in the article, there are a few things that are completely subject to our consent because they're natural rights and nobody can take them away from us. One of those is the freedom of our conscience, our inner life, our spiritual life, you might say. Another is, believe it or not, now I'm not being subversive. I'm just saying, according to the founders, another one of those rights is taxation. I want to lay the foundation for that. I found a great article by a fellow. Let me look down here. Jared Walsack, and the article is Taxation, Representation, and the American Revolution. And you can find the link to that on my blog. But I want to quote him. I've quoted him several times in this blog. Taxation and consent have long been entwined, even under relatively unrepresentative governments. However, should that contract be abused and repeatedly or severely broken, well, this is my comment. However, should that contract be abused and repeatedly or severely broken, the contract between the people and the government is null and void. Again, quoting Walsack, the people, as let me back up. Actually, now I'm quoting James Madison, who said, the people are the only legitimate fountain of power. So I'm going to read that again, mess it up a little bit. Jared Walsack wrote, taxation and consent have long been entwined even under relatively unrepresentative governments. So he ties taxation to consent. We have to give our permission for that. And I would say it has to be earned by the government. And James Madison, of course, one of the founders of the country, one of the authors of the Federalist Papers, which give a rationale and a philosophical underpinning to the Constitution. He said, the people are the only legitimate fountain of power. So we do have power vested in us, and we loan that power to elected officials and administrators, but they are still accountable to us. And that's my point, that Maricopa County, Arizona, all of these people, they're accountable to us, all the way up to the top of the executive branch, every branch of government. Thomas Jefferson was insistent upon the primacy of natural rights, even over the authority that we invest in our administrators and politicians, as I said. Our rulers, he said, can have authority over such natural rights, now listen to this, only as we have submitted to them. The rights of conscience we have never submitted, we could not submit. We are answerable for them to our God. There's no greater form of representation and more basic of natural rights than the right to fair, clean, and well-administered elections. We have to have confidence in knowing that our vote has been counted, that our voice has been heard. It's non-negotiable, guys. The burden of proof is on those in whom we have vested election administration. And so far, who's run this election? Who's ultimately responsible for it? The Secretary of State, who's now claiming victory, and the county recorder's office. And I would say there are other counties that need to be investigated. Pima County is one that I think there are some very controversial things there, including our county recorder, Casares Kelly, hanging out with the Secretary of State shortly before the election and posting that on social media. So they've failed us. They really have. And they can stand up and do the PR tap dance all they want, but the fact is they've failed in their duty. Again, Walsack, for the champions of American independence, the problem was not that taxes were high, but that they were arbitrary, occasionally capricious and punitive, and most importantly, adopted without the consent of the governed. So that's an important point to understand. The American revolutionists weren't saying, we don't want to be taxed. They're taxing the heck out of us. They were saying, we don't have a say in this. This is a natural right. You have to have our consent. And they knew, look, think about it. Once they claimed independence from Great Britain, they had to finance their own war. They were on their own. They didn't get any help from Great Britain. They were cut off from the mother country. This wasn't about money. It was about consent. It was about fair representation. And what did they tie to that representation? Taxes. And this is where I make the case that the precedent has been set that when things get really out of hand, that taxes can only be levied upon our consent. Now, I say this principle applies to the 2022 midterms. Now, listen to my rationale. Voters did not consent to the conflict of interest in having a Secretary of State involved in her own election. Obviously, a conflict of interest. No state employee can do this, from what I understand. I know there's a statute. I wish I had it with me, but there's a statute that says as much. I'll try to bring it to a future show. We did not consent to unlawful exceptions to be made to the standard chain of command protocol. We didn't consent to being blocked from a full accounting and a right to a recount or a redo of a botched election. And all of those things are things that we have a right to demand. Many of their grievances have been well stated in the letter from Attorney General Branovich's office, which I read to you. Let's see. Thousands of citizens find the administration of this election and the responses to thousands of complaints, indeed, and I believe I'm quoting from the Declaration of Independence here, arbitrary, capricious, and remedies, quote, adopted without the consent of the governors. So again, Jared Walsack, here's another quote. He said, there's a long tradition linking taxation to ensuring fair representation. He wrote, taxation and consent have long been entwined, even under relatively unrepresentative governments. There are many things that government can do against the wishes of the people, but taxation is too large an undertaking to be accomplished with at least tacit consent. Throughout history, tax compliance has been the exception rather than the rule. That's an interesting statement. I'd like to dig deeper into that. Champions of liberty, moreover, have recognized their power to resist taxation as a vital bargaining chip in securing their liberties. Did you get that? Champions of liberty have recognized their power to resist taxation as a vital bargaining chip in securing their liberties. Now, where does he get that statement from? Does he pull that out of a hat? No, I'll show you. Exercising the rights of conditional consent in the face of authoritarianism has been a prerogative of the people for hundreds of years. And this goes back to Runnymede, where the withdrawal of consent from the people regarding revenue compelled King John to sign Magna Carta. So using their consent to taxation or lack of consent led to one of the greatest documents in history, the Magna Carta. Okay, Magna Carta is the foundation of our freedoms and our republic. It's huge. Okay, so again, Walsack. By insisting that taxes only be imposed with the consent of the governed, America's founders believed they were doing nothing more than vindicating their rights as Englishmen. At that time, Englishmen. Of course, the U.S. wasn't around. The latest in a long line of patriots who zealously guarded their ancient liberties. So that tells you right there, this heritage of liberty goes way back even before Magna Carta. But it was never about the money. Frequently, colonial assemblies refused to even remit sums necessary to pay the salaries of colonial governors. It was about a principle. Now listen to this. The power of the purse belongs with the people. They saw this not as a new right, but as the rights of Englishmen, a hard-won battle stretching from Magna Carta through the English Civil Wars, surviving the Stuart Restoration and coming to full blossom in the glorious Revolution of England. It was a heritage, it was a right, and it was being denied them. So I want to switch gears a little bit here and just talk about the law in general. And there's an excellent quote by Thomas Jefferson. Now, I submit that Thomas Jefferson, as the drafter of the Declaration of Independence, as laying a lot of the foundation for the Constitution, having been one of three authors who wrote the Federalist Papers, and here he is, this great man. I have copies of their books, the Federalist Papers here. I'm reading through them. Thomas Jefferson said, a strict observance of the written laws is doubtless one of the high duties of a good citizen, but it is not the highest. The laws of necessity, of self-preservation, of saving our country when in danger are of a higher obligation. Now, let me pause for a moment. Again, if you watch The Final War, it's free. You're going to see how much danger our country is in. Most people aren't aware of it. And as the movie starts out, it says, we're losing a war where we don't even know we're fighting. So watch that movie and share it. It's crucial. Anyway, back to Jefferson's quote. To lose our country by a scrupulous adherence to written law would be to lose the law itself, with life, liberty, property, and all those who are enjoying them with us, thus absurdly sacrificing the ends to the means. Tax law is good. A lot of laws are good. But according to Jefferson, there are times to set those aside for the greater good. And let's see, again, Walsack, whatever else taxation should be, it had to be by consent. That idea, at once steeped in British history and radically revolutionary, remains an animating principle, not only in taxation, but for the whole of the American spirit. So that principle ties in well with Jefferson's quote. We need to be law-abiding citizens, but understand every legislated law in the country, in every state, has to be subordinate to the Constitution. And the purpose of the law is to protect our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If those things are threatened, the founders gave some caveats, some outs to correct the situation. So I want to read what I wrote about that. Built into our country's founding is an acknowledgement of the need to realign the law when it has strayed from the principles from which it derives its legitimacy. This is not done as the Declaration of Independence has it, for light and transient causes, but in crisis such as under circumstances of fraud, maladministration, and malfeasance by the government, it is justified. Okay, our country was founded upon some guys sitting in a room writing a declaration saying, look, this isn't working for us. You guys, you aren't giving us a voice. You're treating us unfairly. I see a lot of parallels. The Declaration reads, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to those ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, I'm not advocating an overthrow of government. I'm applying this principle to say we must have election reform. We got to have it now. We can't let this happen again. This election cannot be certified. And I say that as a citizen with the authority and the right to protect my natural rights as a citizen. The founders made it clear that the people have a right to appeal to a higher law, under which all laws, statutes, and mandates are subordinate. As Jefferson codified with these words declared in 1776, quote, whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Again, that's worth repeating. Citizens do not abolish the law to promote popular contemporary causes. And look, the left is doing that right now. They're trying to get rid of laws because they want what they want. They didn't like, look, they didn't want abortion they to go into the hands of the states to decide. Okay. They wanted Roe v. Wade to stand. What they don't realize is they actually have more freedom because now they can address the issue on a state issue, but I digress. So what I'm talking about is not for the purpose of getting rid of laws to get your pet cause of the day. For that would be anarchy. And what do these people stand for? Anarchy. There's a contrast, there's a difference. And you could say, well, the left could do what you're talking about, Kelly. Well, no, not exactly. And I would say at times, subordinate laws, subordinate to the Constitution, may be set aside for the sake of reform if they have strayed from the immutable law of liberty for the purpose of restoring the intent and validity of the law and to secure the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Upon this very principle, the United States was founded. So in this case, we have abundant evidence that our own administrators of the election have messed it up royally and very, very likely broken the law. So this is a place where we can say, we're putting our foot down, this cannot be certified. It's not breaking the law, but it's essentially the people saying, nope, this is unacceptable. And I hope Republicans and Democrats will hear this and put the brakes on, because if you don't have a fair election today, this day it's Democrats, next time it's Republicans. I've already heard some Republicans saying, well, if they're going to cheat, we're going to cheat. That's ridiculous. That's cowardice. That's, like my parents used to say, two wrongs don't make a right. What we have to do is have the courage to stand up and draw the line. I did hashtag I am the wall. Look, each and every one of you, if you feel helpless, just remember that I am the wall. It stops with you. You have that authority. You have that power. You can't go out and storm the county building or something. That wouldn't be appropriate. And look, some people have said the only way is violence. The only way is to physically throw them out or to take up guns. No, that's not the only way. The founders gave us away, and they not only talked about it, they did it. And of course, you'd say, well, the American Revolution led to armed conflict. It didn't have to. It didn't have to. Plus, that was a different situation because we had an outside power. This is something we have to figure out together on our own. And again, I say, I don't care what political party you're from, we have to have fair, transparent, well-run elections. All right, so state governments are obligated to earn their keep. Now, this is the conclusion of my article. State governments are obligated to earn their keep by governing honestly and lawfully. Accountability must be restored to Arizona and to the country. And in the case of the 2022 midterm elections, only a well-monitored redo provides a remedy. Look, this election is so messed up. We've got to have a redo. We must call upon our state legislators and executors to do their duty to the people and the Constitution in addressing their grievances equitably. Now, look at this shirt I'm wearing right now. Ducey doesn't lift. Where the hell is Doug Ducey? I got to give kudos to Mark Bronovich and Jennifer Wright for standing up and doing their duty. And I've been able to communicate with them and urge them to do this. And I'm not the cause of it. It's because a lot of people have been standing up. But look, Mark Bronovich can leave office with a legacy for having done something remarkable and historic. So right now, call the Attorney General's office and give them praise for what they've done. I don't care what their past is. I don't care about nunchucks. Look, if they do the right thing, they do the right thing, and they need to stand on that. So we, as a people, need to make sure this doesn't get dropped, okay? We must call upon our state legislators and executors to do their duty to the people and the Constitution in addressing our grievances equitably. Those grievances can't be swept under the rug. We're not going to allow that. And look, we don't have to get in a January 6th situation. We don't have to storm buildings. We just have to hold our ground and not accept anything except non-certification and a highly monitored, regulated redo, which, look, Katie Hobbs needs to recuse herself. Absolutely. I'm one person, but I would wager there are millions of people who would agree with that. So all people, regardless of political affiliation, must have clean, timely elections that are above reproach. Taking office under anything less negates a candidate's legitimacy. Pushing through certification, despite, quote, myriad problems, usurps the natural rights upon which our country was founded. Now, listen, here's the very end of my article. Look it up. The problematic November 8 election, still ongoing, must not be certified. I stand behind that. I'm not afraid to speak out for the truth. We're not helpless. Stand your ground. Read my article, share it around, and by all means, watch The Final War because you need to see what's at stake. Don't back down. Don't accept anything less than what the founders intended for you.